Welcome to Outside is Magic, a podcast about the intersection of creativity and the outdoors. I'm Christopher San Augustin, a creative director and founder of Broken Coastal. In this episode, I sit down with painter and craftsman Lucas Strain, the founder of Sparkle Factory and lead painter at Allied Cycleworks in Bentonville, Arkansas. Lucas shares how he found purpose through craft, his deep connection to the nature, and why he believes discipline and design are key to creating work that truly moves people. We talk about the mistakes, mentorship, mental health, and what it means to make beautiful things with your hands. Let's jump in. This is my conversation with Lucas Strain. Yeah, I'm really excited to dive into your career because it's been so amazing following along,
Thanks,
knowing
man.
knowing you in Portland and what you did working in Eugene and where you are now is just so cool. If you could just talk a little bit about that journey, if you want, you can dive into your childhood a bit or whatever, but mainly just maybe just talk a little bit about your journey of
Yeah.
where you started and how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah. Well, I guess I should start off by saying I paint bikes in case anyone didn't know. Uh, but yeah, no, I think I struggled as a youth, and I don't know how much I want to probably go into that, but I ended up in the West Coast with a couple of family members close by, and I ended up working or volunteering as a kid. I was 14 at a shop in Eugene, and as I was kind of trying to figure out how to get a job and where I should live and things like that. There was a guy, Todd Gardner, who taught the welders and taught powder coating there. And he kind of scooped me under his wing. And yeah, he was my mentor basically. And he showed me everything I know about paint.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel I wonder if you identified your willingness to work super hard. That's something I
We
noticed about
definitely
you.
did.
Yeah. I noticed that about you. You're so dedicated when you put yourself into something. It did Where did that come from, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a kid, I had a pretty troubled youth, and I was pretty detached from my family, pretty young, pretty at a pretty young age. And I think I grew up where everyone around me was, doing drugs and drinking and kind of failing. And I guess I didn't identified a lot of failure. A lot of the things associated with failure were just a willingness to push. And that's not true for everybody, and that's not true for everybody's situations. But I knew that would be true for me. And so I think at a young age, I really tried to apply myself as best as I could. And I realized without, really any form of higher education, I was going to have to find a craft and I was going to have to get really good at it for other people to see value in what I could create. And so that was kind of my driving force behind when Todd gave me that opportunity to learn how to paint. I kind of just threw everything at it because I really wanted to succeed.
Nice. Yeah, when Todd brought you under his wing, did you see it as a career or just more just a creative outlet, a pathway to something better?
I think a little bit of both. I've always been a bit of maybe a schemer is the wrong word, but tried to see ways to succeed in different avenues in life. And I saw it definitely as an opportunity. I knew I could make some money, but I also knew I was a creative person, and I was like, okay, this is a really interesting way to apply that. I always struggled with things that weren't super technical when it comes to creating, and I thought painting bikes and the hardline style that I kind of developed was very conducive to structure and discipline and process. And so I think that I kind of threw myself at that because I knew if I followed the directions and understood it really, really well, I could create in kind of an infinite direction.
Totally. Frame painting is kind of at the intersection of craft, like you're saying, process, and then also creativity. That's it's really cool. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about your creative process or your process
Yeah.
in general of painting?
Yeah. I think for painting, I'm mostly inspired by nature. I would say that. Again, I grew up kind of on my own for the most part. And so I spent a lot of time outside. And so I always look to the color palette and the grains of wood or the color of feathers or things like that. I love that natural contrast that you saw. I kind of almost correlated it to cooking because I also grew up on I ended up living on a hippie commune when I was really young. And so they one of the things they teach you is you always pair food, you pair the if you were going to eat a bird or something like that, you would tend to pair it with the types of fruits that the bird would eat in real life, and they naturally taste good together. And I kind of like adopted that conceptually into like how I would look for colors and for balance.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, I never thought about when you look at a feather, it's so gorgeous. Even the most basic feather has
The
so
most
many,
basic feather.
yeah, has so many color
Yeah.
variations, and yeah, that's cool. That's a good inspiration right there.
Yeah. I mean, like even like the color of like the legs of birds versus like the color of the feathers. Like you don't think about it until you see one up close and like how beautiful the contrast is. And you could get super nerdy with like all of the science of color and like the scientific names that like make it visually appealing to like the human psyche. But I found all of that to be super, super interesting. So that's
Yeah.
my general driving force.
So I imagine you started out probably just experimenting, mixing colors together, but is it now more of like a science?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a science. I think now, I mean, I guess yes and no. It's not always a science, but I think now I tend to try and create. I'll try and draw digitally first because I think it allows me to experiment at a vaster rate than when I do stuff in person with painting, because painting has a lot of rework and prep time. And so that's about 90% of the time actually when you're creating something. And so in order to avoid that, I do a lot of it digitally now. And that allows me to like play with the color palettes and the textures a lot more. And then when I find something that I'm pretty stoked on and happy with, I then try and kind of like reverse engineer it and be like, okay, so how am I going to apply that technique? What type of tools am I going to need to create it? And then you go one step back and you're like, cool, what science do I need to know about the paint system and like how I'm going to have to apply it in order to use that type of tool? And then, yeah,
Gotcha.
and then start.
What program do you use for your prototyping then?
I use Adobe Illustrator a lot for any like sort of like surface design, and then I use Adobe Design, um, or not Design, sorry, Dimension a lot for like higher 3D renders if I was going to do a presentation for like a higher end still or something like that.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, I was gonna say like technical challenges. It sounds like there's probably a lot of technical challenges about like reverse engineering colors that you see out in the world and all of that.
Yeah, yeah, I think paint is really cool, but one of the big struggles with paint is durability. And a lot of that comes down to like the knowledge of the system you're putting in, how you like prep your substrate or whatever material you're going to paint, how you're going to apply the original primers or colors and then clear coats on top, and the time frame in which you're allowed to do that, and then making sure they don't get any sort of like oddities on them while you're in the painting process, any sort of vapor or chemical exposure, something like that that would keep it from being as bonded as it needs to be. Yeah, and then the more you're kind of applying odd textures, people are really into like hydro dipping currently, where you'll like basically put a bunch of paints on a tension of the water on top and you dip something in, and kind of like how all those stick, right? So it's very different from like spraying paint through a gun, which is how most of the time it's professionally applied. But yeah, there's a lot of thoughts in there.
Yeah, totally. And I imagine when you first started out, you probably had a very limited tool set, but now I imagine you have a pretty nice tool set at your disposal.
I have a pretty decent tool set now. Yeah, Todd was nice enough when he taught me to let me just consistently ruin his things and learn. Um, yeah, so I'll be forever grateful for that. And yeah, now I definitely have a much nicer tool set, though I am still pretty obsessive about, trying to keep everything nice because I do appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, what does your workspace look like?
Man, I should have a picture. I do about 4/5 of my work at the Allied Factory in person, and my workstation is like a 4 by 2 foot desk, and it's about 3 feet away from our extremely fancy like 30 by 30 foot downdraft booth. And then I have like a 15-foot table that has a bunch of masks and transfer papers and things like that for a lot of decal work and weeding, which is basically like you're removing all the excess of decals. But yeah, yeah, it's a I don't know, very industrial looking space.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine it has to be super clean.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're working with Allied, but you do you also have your own
Yeah,
business on the side too? Is that how it
yeah,
works?
yeah. I have a separate company called Sparkle Factory, and I've been running that for about 4 years now. And that is just custom paint consulting and design I do for pretty much anybody outside of Allied. Occasionally, I'll do a little bit of work for Rafa or Specialized or some other brands and things like that. And then I also do just general customer paint jobs. And people reach out and want something, have a vision of something, and try and help them create it.
That's cool. So I guess your relationship with Allied is pretty solid then to
Yeah,
allow you to
yeah,
do that. Yeah.
yeah. I worked
Yeah.
originally when I came from Portland. I got hired on like a 6 week um, term, and then as kind of a consultant, and I was helping them set up their factory, kind of train the workers, train the paint fours, train prep workers, finish workers, different things like that. But they ended up offering me a job after that, and I stayed for about a year and a half. And then my lovely partner Sammy was finishing up school in Atlanta, so we took like a bit of a hiatus and moved to Atlanta. And I started working as a contractor and a consultant for them for the next 4 years. And then I just took a job back again in January. So it's been a bit of a,
That's
but yeah,
amazing, man.
I would say it's a good relationship.
Yeah, yeah, I know we all miss you here, but we're all super proud of you. Like
Oh, thanks,
whenever we
man.
get,
Yeah, I miss y'all
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah, we're all
I'm
definitely rooting for you.
scheming. I'm scheming to get Sammy out there so I can have her hang out with all y'all.
Definitely a long-term goal of mine is to have you do one of my frames for sure.
Sick.
At
Yeah,
some
that'd be
point,
tight. That'd be sick.
gotta wait for that forever bike.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I guess speaking about projects, is there the most memorable project or there's something that you're just super proud of? I imagine there's a lot of them.
Man, I think I did a project for Allied a couple years ago that we ended up doing like kind of in collaboration with Envy. It was like a kind of a silver and black kind of like crazy, awkwardly detailed kind of spider web looking bike, and I really like that one. It uses a chemical process called marbleizing, which is basically like a pressure sensitive paint. You apply a surface tension over the paint within like a 15-second window, and when the paint gets touched, it changes from silver to black. And the more crazy you can apply texture and technique over the top of it in that time window, the more detail and depth you can create. And that was one of the first techniques that Todd showed me, which was 17 years ago now when I was 15. And I think I've always kind of stuck with that one because I've always thought that was really, really cool, and kind of tried to make that my kind of signature style over the years and create like a super intricate depth to it that a lot of other painters don't normally get. So that's probably the one I'm most proud of.
Nice. Are there any like painting processes that you really want to do on a new project that you haven't done yet?
I designed a paint scheme for one of the Allied athletes, Pace McLevin, recently for one of his kits. I built a pretty good relationship with most of the athletes we worked with now, where they have like a pretty significant level of trust with me, I would say, which I'm very grateful to them for. But they'll give me like a thought or an idea, and they'll kind of just let me go wild with it. And most of the time, they come out really happy with almost no revisions, which is awesome. The one I recently did for him, I've been working on a technique to get this like kind of scraped, almost barbed wire texture look out of. And I'm still kind of like working on developing that technique a little bit. But yeah, that's probably the one I'm most excited about. I love
Yeah,
trying to
super cool.
create organic textures and patterns, not artificially necessarily, but like as organically as I can in a fully artificial, you know, tub basically. Like my
Yeah.
parameters are all artificial, so I like to try and go back to that kind of organic route when we're talking about the pattern, the color palettes with the animals and stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah, there's something cool about having set parameters that you have to design within and then just seeing what you can create out of it versus being able to do whatever you want and then you're just,
yeah,
it's so hard
I think I
to
actually fail
organize.
as a creative without those parameters. I can't draw at all. I suck at it. If you were to give me like a pencil and a piece of paper and be like, "Oh, he does a lot of cool art stuff. He can for sure draw." I can't fucking draw at all. 0%. And I kind of find that interesting, but it's also like a challenge. I design in Illustrator or some sort of like 3D program better than I could ever draw with a pencil, and I don't really understand why that is yet, but I love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I can work Pathfinder tool like nobody's business.
Yeah. I mean, that's okay, right? I started sewing recently, and
Mm.
I think one of the beautiful gifts from it is that it inspired me to actually draw again because I'm drawing out like patterns and ideas. I used to sketch all the time, but it had been 10 years. I was
Yeah.
like, oh man, this is such like a cool thing that came out of it.
Yeah, it's so sick. I mean, I have one of my good friends, Rena Rio, is a amazing artist, and she can always draw. And I always try and channel her inner like freedom that she has when she creates to try and cultivate that skill set in my.
2 years ago, we commissioned her to do a bottle for us with Specialized for this like women's retreat that we did here in Oak Ridge. I'll send you one. It came out really
Oh,
cool.
sweet. Damn.
I think
Yeah,
I'm
that'd be
actually
cool.
wearing the t-shirt. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wearing the t-shirt. This is the design she
Oh,
made.
sick.
Yeah.
Oh, that is tight.
That's funny. I guess we kind of touched on this, but like dream collab.
Man.
It seems you already had some bangers, but I imagine there's somebody out there.
Pretty hard. That's pretty hard. I've always been tempted to try and do something in furniture, to be honest, just to like totally throw everybody like a curveball here. I love furniture because it's like a similar sense of like a fixed parameter that you I get with painting. I've done some woodworking and a lot of metalworking, and so I know how difficult that is. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say that or shoes, one or the other. Yeah,
Yeah, I could see you doing both of those
no,
for sure. I have like these kind of cool painted boxes behind me, and they're so simple, but it's a good canvas.
yeah.
After you spent so much time on a frame like Payson or Kate Courtney's, do you feel super connected to it and the rider who's going to get to use the bike? Is there like
Yeah.
connection?
Yeah, I think occasionally, I try and be somewhat detached so that I don't like have that like crazy cat lady vibe always, because it's
Yeah,
pretty easy. But occasionally I will do a frame and I'll be like, damn, I wish that was my bike. Like I'm a little jealous of that. And I think that's always a good thing. I always think that that means it's somewhat successful if I can be, you know, slightly jealous of it.
totally. How about like a feeling? Like, are there like any emotions that you try to get out of your work when a customer gets it?
I think I look to create that same sense I see when I look out in nature, to be honest. Like when I go hiking or me and Sammy go on vacation and we went to Colorado last year and we did a bunch of mountain biking. Like when I see the rocks or the trees out there and I feel like that just sense of joy and like whatever divine spiritual creation that is the world, I look to kind of like, inspire people in that same sense. Something, yeah, like organic and natural, but like just almost precious like a rock.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Going back to the feathers, I mean, a rock is equally as
But yeah.
complex. It's
Oh yeah.
insane.
Yeah. And I think it takes a long time. I think one of the things about growing up the way that I did and being out in the middle of nowhere and kind of alone is like you have a lot of time to look at a lot of the world. I think it was like an interesting way to like grow up kind of outside of a more modern society, just because you get to look at stuff that most people I think kind of skip by. And yeah, so I've always been very appreciative that we live in such a beautiful world.
Yeah, I guess your answer there might answer this question I'm about to ask you, but creative block, is that something that you deal with?
Yeah, yeah, definitely so. I think I do a lot of production management at Allied, and so outside of being really creative, I also have to like manage a workforce and create process and stuff like that within that. And I think sometimes I'll get a little too stuck into like optimizing a system for efficiency or for, whatever we might be looking for. And that pulls me kind of in the opposite direction I would feel in like a creative sense. And so occasionally if we're doing like a really big ramp of production or releasing a new model, I'll tend to get like a little bit of a creative block for, 4 to 6 weeks. And I'll try and create and I'll like look at it from the wrong perspective. I'll look at it from like, oh, that won't be efficient to do that, or that won't be fast enough, which is always the wrong way to approach design. I feel like it's always best to come up with what's the most memorable and special. And then again, I try and create and then reverse engineer from there, but always start with like what can I create that's the best and then go back.
Yeah. So are you also thinking potentially about the future of bike painting as technology gets
Yeah.
crazy and AI takes
I
over?
think one of the things as a kid, again, growing up kind of weird, is I always wanted a craft. I always really respected craftsmen and women that had a skill set, because it's doing something with your hands and making something that's so unique and special is not something someone can easily take. It could always be done for sure, but I always really gravitated towards things like that. I think that's all another reason I pushed so hard when I was trying to be like a high performance athlete as well, as I like really respected that when you met an athlete or you saw how far they got, it's pretty hard to rob them of the efforts they put in to get there. And I always appreciated things in life that required that.
Totally. Yeah, speaking of athletics, where are you right now in your relationship with going really, really fast?
Man, Right now, I'm kind of stepping back a little bit from racing. I'm still on a pretty cool team that's based out of Arkansas, Velvet, that I really appreciate, and they give me a lot of support to do a lot of things. But something I think I do a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people do a lot, is that when they struggle in life, they sink into the thing they're comfortable with. And I think I was doing that a little bit with like high performance cycling. And I try and be really observant of like my mental headspace and things that affect my life. And I was evaluating that at a certain point, I was putting in more than I was really being rewarded for. And so, yeah, I tried to spend this whole last basically 24 months deciding, okay, I'm only one human. I have this much energy. How do I really want to break my world up? And what's going to make me the happiest 5 to 10 years from now? Yeah. So I'm in a slight
Yeah.
twist in the road here, but
Yeah, yeah. I think so many of us are, for sure.
it's pretty funny. As I train less, I get stronger in certain ways, which is really weird. And I don't know whether that's from like psychological pressure I used to put on myself or just the fact that I'm happier. I don't really know, but it's really interesting. I think it shows a lot about, yeah, pressure and recovery and lots of things like that. Sometimes training a little less and, being a little happier can make you a little faster.
Totally. Do you feel super happy being a frame painter right now, or do you see yourself stepping into a different role in the future, or are you, yeah, where are you at with
I
that?
think I'm pretty happy being a frame painter. I think I would like to almost think of myself more as a craftsman than a frame painter specifically. And something I did have tried to do over the last 7 years in my career is I've tried to kind of like diversify what I can offer from the same creative space with the same rough creative parameters. The folks in Bentonville were kind enough to let me do like an interior build out for one of the Rafa stores, sheerly based on like some of the creative projects I had done for them. And that opportunity was really, really cool because I got to kind of like again use paint and use surface design the same way I normally do, but apply it somewhere differently and still try and achieve that same type of feeling and reaction that I was searching for in bikes. And since then, that's kind of spread through other businesses and companies that have requested things like that from me. But yeah, I think I'm happy being a painter, but I like to think of myself as, yeah, like I'm more of a craftsman or, a designer if I can.
Totally. Yeah, I totally get that. I don't like labeling people or myself. I feel like whatever we end up doing is just such a small part of who we are, and we're so much more.
Yeah, totally. They talk about, I have to bring a lot of things back to bike racing because I've done that for so long, but it's like that concept of like athlete first, which they talk about, which is like you see a lot of athletes that cross over in different things. And it's more of like a human personality trait of this person is a creative and they put a lot of effort into anything. And almost any way you're going to apply them, they're going to be really good in that direction. And so I've started to try and apply that same thought to all of the people that work under me or over me or beside me in any of my team, and apply that same thought process to them and try and let people excel in different directions that maybe they don't even know they can yet.
Yeah. Cool. I think we'll kind of wind down a little bit, but before we go, um, maybe you could talk about like, there been any kind of challenges or failures that you've like that's happened and you've come out of it much better?
Yeah, I think I did a project for Payson maybe a year ago. I'm sure he'll remember it as I talk about this if he watches it. But we were doing a rebrand for his podcast, and we were doing a paint job for that. And I think him and I weren't working super well together at that moment, like just creatively, like our we weren't aligned super well. And I drew something that I think was pretty cool, and I think we both liked it. But then, like in the execution, it just fell flat, and I was so unhappy with it. We never showed it. We never did anything with it, and I sanded it all down by hand, even though we have like a team of people to do that, just because I wanted the time to think about what mistakes I had made, what led me to where I was at. And then I think, yeah, I kind of came up with the fact that like I was in a bad headspace at the moment. Again, I was a little too heavy in the production side, and I was trying to create, yeah, in the wrong with the wrong parameters, and I ended up coming up with something that was just kind of bland. It wasn't super interesting. It wasn't inspiring. It didn't meet any of the criteria I've talked about earlier, and I think it was a great reminder that to be really good and interesting, you definitely have to have discipline, and I lost it for a moment.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe defining that criteria you were talking about, for sure. I mean, making mistakes is, I feel like, one of the best things people can do, right?
I mean, I haven't. Yeah, I mean, again, I'll send this to Todd and make him listen to it. But yeah, he watched me make every mistake you could imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, sanding the wrong way, painting the wrong way, pretty
Yeah.
much sweeping the wrong way. I've done it all. Yeah, but I've learned
Yeah.
because I really don't like making mistakes. So I almost tend to think about it at this point of like, man, if I keep fucking up, I will be really great one day.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I wonder if Todd, as he watched you make all those mistakes, if he was just in his head, just like kind of like stoked that you're making the mistakes, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think I remember one time he came in there and I had been trying to put one decal on a bike for over an hour and I just couldn't get it straight. And I'm super OCD, so I was like, it's not straight. And he was like, yo, you look like a deer in the headlights. I walked in and I could just tell you were so stressed about it. And he was like, one day you're either gonna be really good at this or you're gonna quit. And I was like, you're right. I better get good at this.
Yeah. Totally. Okay. So how about before we go,
Mhm.
like parting words, inspiration from Lucas? What is something that you would like to share with the world about? Yeah. About
I think
something.
I think life's really short and that I think you should do exactly what you know would make you happy. And if you try really hard at it, you will find a way to make it sustainable for your life. And even if it's difficult, you'll be happy every day. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really great way that I've always kind of had my own back as I'm sure a lot of my friends will know I've struggled with a lot of things in life. So yeah, it was always a way I
Yeah.
kind of stayed motivated.
To push you one step further, what if people are struggling with finding happiness? Do you have any advice on kind of workshopping happiness in someone's life?
Yeah, I think I'm a pretty anxious person. I've definitely struggled with anxiety and depression my whole life since I was a child, and I think I tend to really pause when I've done the same thing more than twice. If I've ended the same road more than twice, and I'm like, man, this did not bring me joy, I just don't allow myself to take the same path. It's not an option. I just, even if I'm uncomfortable, scared of the new direction, I still choose the other direction because yeah, it's insanity to go the same route when you know it's going to end poorly. And I think at a certain point, again, with like mistakes, as long as you're choosing at a certain point to try something different, even if it's scary, you will statistically be very likely to find happiness.
Love it. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on, man. This has been
Yeah,
great.
man. I really apologize again for all of the mishaps, the sickness and stuff last week.
All right, that's our show for today. If you like this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend. It all really helps out. If you have any questions about the creative process or anything in between, please drop a comment. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. You can follow along at Broken Coastal on Instagram and YouTube. Subscribe to my newsletter. It's completely free, a weekly dose of inspiration at the intersection of design and outdoors. Thanks for being here.